My name is Sheila, and I'm 58 years old. As I stood in my kitchen that Saturday afternoon preparing appetizers for what would become the most eye-opening evening of my life, I had no idea that a single comment would change everything. You see, I've always believed that kindness and generosity would be returned in kind. I'd spent years supporting my daughter-in-law, opening my home to her, and my son thinking family meant everything. But sometimes, kindness can be mistaken for weakness, and sometimes the people closest to you forget where their blessings come from. What happened at that weekend party taught me something profound about respect, dignity, and the quiet power that comes from knowing your own worth. Before I share what happened that changed everything, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and please hit that like button if you've ever felt unappreciated by family. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story ends. Let me take you back to understand how I got to that moment. Becoming a single mother wasn't in my plans, but life has a way of rewriting our stories. When my husband passed away from a sudden heart attack, Marcus was only 12 years old. In one devastating moment, I went from being part of a team to carrying everything alone. The grief was overwhelming, but I knew that little boy needed me to be strong. Those early years were a constant juggling act. I worked as an administrative assistant during the day, pushing papers and answering phones for 8 hours, then rushed to my part-time bookkeeping job in the evenings. Some nights, I'd get home at 10:30, help Marcus with homework, and fall into bed exhausted, only to start all over again the next morning. Every penny counted. I clipped coupons, bought generic brands, and learned to stretch $1 until it screamed. But it was worth it. Watching Marcus graduate high school as valedictorian, then earn a full scholarship to State University, filled me with a pride that no amount of exhaustion could diminish. Those 15 years of sacrifice led to something beautiful when I finally saved enough to buy our little house on Maple Street. It wasn't much, just a modest 3-bedroom with a small yard, but it was ours. Marcus met Brittany during his senior year of college. She seemed sweet at first, with her bright smile and enthusiastic way of talking about their future together. When they married 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy for them. Young love reminded me of my own early days with Marcus's father, full of hope and dreams. But newlywed life came with financial challenges. Marcus was starting his career in accounting, and Brittany was working part-time at a boutique while figuring out her path. When they struggled to afford rent on even a small apartment, I made what seemed like a natural decision. I offered them my house to live in rent-free while I moved into a tiny 1-bedroom apartment across town. "Mom, are you sure?" Marcus had asked, concern written across his face. "We can figure something else out." "Nonsense," I'd replied, packing my belongings with determination. "Family helps family. Besides, that house deserves to have young people filling it with life and laughter." At first, Brittany was genuinely grateful. She'd hug me and say things like, "Sheila, I can't believe how generous you are. We're so lucky to have you." Those words warmed my heart and made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. But gradually something shifted. It started small. When I'd visit, Brittany would mention tasks that needed doing around the house, not as requests, but as expectations. "Oh, good you're here. The gutters need cleaning, and I noticed the guest bathroom could use a deep scrub." When her friends visited, she'd introduce me not as her mother-in-law, but simply as Sheila, leaving my relationship to the family deliberately vague. Marcus seemed oblivious to these changes. When I gently mentioned feeling a bit taken for granted, he'd shake his head and say, "Mom, you're being too sensitive. Brittany loves you. She's just stressed about work and adjusting to married life." His loyalty to his wife, while admirable, left me feeling increasingly isolated and unheard. The weekend party that changed everything started innocently enough. Brittany announced her plans on a Tuesday, bubbling with excitement about hosting her new circle of friends for what she called a proper housewarming celebration. Never mind that they'd been living in my house for over 2 years. I want everything to be perfect, she told me over the phone. These are important people from my networking group, and first impressions matter. The way she said it made it clear that she expected my help, though she never actually asked. I found myself volunteering, as I always did. "What can I do to help, dear?" The list that followed was extensive. Grocery shopping for appetizers, wine, and decorations. Deep cleaning the entire house, including baseboards and ceiling fans. Preparing elaborate finger foods that would impress her sophisticated guests. I spent the entire week planning and preparing. Tuesday evening, I researched appetizer recipes that looked restaurant quality. Wednesday, I made a detailed shopping list and budget dipping into my modest savings to buy premium ingredients. Thursday was spent at 3 different stores hunting for the perfect combination of items that would make Brittany proud. Friday, I took a personal day from work to start food preparation and begin the deep cleaning process. Brittany's instructions came in the form of text messages throughout the week, each one more demanding than the last. "Make sure you clean the baseboards in every room. My friend Ashley notices details like that. Don't forget to vacuum the stairs and the upstairs hallway. Use the attachment for the corners. I hope you're planning something impressive for appetizers. These people are used to upscale events." The way she phrased these messages bothered me more than I wanted to admit. There was no please or thank you, no acknowledgement that I was going above and beyond to help her succeed. Instead, she wrote like I was hired, help, not family. What really stung was overhearing a phone conversation she had with someone on Thursday evening. I'd let myself in to drop off groceries and heard her laughing voice from the living room. "Oh, don't worry about the setup and everything. I have help coming. She's very reliable and does excellent work." Help. That's how she saw me. Not as her mother-in-law who'd given up her own home for their benefit, but as convenient help. On Friday evening, I decided to buy myself something special to wear to the party. I rarely splurged on clothes, but I wanted to look nice for Brittany's important event. At the department store, I found a lovely navy blue dress with 3/4 sleeves, classy and age-appropriate. It cost more than I usually spent on clothing, but I felt elegant wearing it. When I showed it to Brittany the next morning, her reaction was lukewarm at best. She looked me up and down with a critical eye and said, "That's interesting, very practical." The way she emphasized practical made it sound like a criticism rather than a compliment. That night, I lay awake feeling an anxiety I couldn't quite name. Something about the way Brittany had been treating me, the casual disregard disguised as jokes, the assumption that I existed to serve her needs, left me feeling uneasy. But I couldn't put my finger on exactly what was wrong, and I certainly never imagined how much worse it would get. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather. I'd spent the day arranging flowers, setting up the dining room buffet, and putting finishing touches on everything. The appetizers looked magazine-worthy. The house sparkled, and I felt a genuine sense of pride in what I'd accomplished. Guests began arriving at 7 o'clock, and I positioned myself near the front door to welcome them warmly. Brittany had invited 6 people from her networking group, an eclectic mix of young professionals who seemed genuinely impressed by the house and the spread I'd prepared. "This place is absolutely gorgeous," gushed Ashley, a blonde marketing coordinator in her late 20s. "And look at all this amazing food. You must have spent days preparing." "The decorations are so tasteful," added Jessica, admiring the flower arrangements I'd spent hours perfecting. "Everything looks so professional and welcoming." For the first few hours, I genuinely enjoyed myself. The guests were engaging conversationalists, asking about the neighborhood, complimenting the renovations Marcus and I had done over the years, and showing genuine interest in my stories about raising a son as a single mother. Trevor, A financial advisor with an easy smile seemed particularly interested in my experience as a working single parent. "That must have been incredibly challenging," he said thoughtfully. "Balancing work and parenting without a partner takes real strength." I found myself sharing stories I rarely told about late nights, helping Marcus with school projects, after working 2 jobs, about celebrating his achievements on a shoestring budget, about the pride I felt watching him graduate college debt-free because of our careful planning and my sacrifices. "Brittany, you're so lucky to have such supportive family," commented Brad, a graphic designer who'd been asking about the family photos displayed throughout the house. "It's clear how much love went into raising Marcus." Throughout the evening, I naturally fell into a hosting role, refilling drinks, bringing fresh appetizer platters from the kitchen, making sure everyone felt comfortable and welcome. It felt natural to me, this caregiving role I'd perfected over decades of putting others first. The guests assumed I was Brittany's mother, a mistake she never bothered to correct. When someone complimented her on raising such a wonderful son, she just smiled and nodded, accepting credit for Marcus's character, without mentioning that I was actually his mother. But the atmosphere was relaxed and friendly conversation flowed easily, and I felt genuinely included in the group. We discussed careers, travel dreams, favorite local restaurants, and shared funny stories about adjusting to adult life. For a few hours, I forgot about the small slights and casual dismissals I'd been experiencing. This felt like family, like community, like belonging. As the evening progressed and the wine continued to flow, everyone seemed more relaxed and animated. Laughter came easier, stories became more elaborate, and the group settled into the comfortable intimacy that develops when strangers become friends over good food and shared conversation. Around 10:30, the mood in the living room had grown particularly jovial. The guests had gravitated toward the comfortable seating area, wine glasses in hand, sharing increasingly personal and amusing anecdotes about their work lives and dating disasters. I was in the kitchen arranging the last of the dessert selections on a serving tray when I heard Ashley's voice rise above the others. "This house is absolutely gorgeous, Brittany, and everything's so perfectly organized and beautiful. You really have an eye for detail." Jessica chimed in enthusiastically. "And the food has been incredible all night. You're such an amazing hostess. I'm definitely taking notes for when I throw my next party." From the kitchen doorway, I smiled at the compliments, feeling proud of how well the evening was going. The hard work had been worth it to see Brittany shining in front of her friends. But then, Brittany's laughter had a different quality to it, slightly slurred from the wine, with an edge I'd never heard before. "Oh, please, ladies, I really can't take all the credit here." All eyes in the room turned expectantly, and I stepped slightly into view, expecting to share in the warm moment of appreciation. What came next knocked the breath out of me. "I mean, just look at Sheila over there," Brittany continued with a theatrical gesture in my direction. "Doesn't she just look like the perfect little maid?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Stunned silence filled the room for a heartbeat, followed by nervous, uncomfortable laughter from some of the guests. But Brittany wasn't finished. The wine had loosened her tongue, and perhaps her true feelings about me. "Seriously, I mean, look at the way she's been running around all night, cleaning up after us, serving drinks, making sure everyone's comfortable. If I didn't know any better, I'd think I hired her from some cleaning service instead of, well, you know." The laughter grew louder and more confident now, with Trevor adding his own commentary. "Well, she certainly dresses the part too, very professional." I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, the silver serving tray growing heavy in my hands. Every person in that room was looking at me now, some with amusement, others with uncomfortable awareness of what was happening. But Brittany noticed my stricken expression and seemed to interpret it as an invitation to continue the joke. "Oh, come on, Sheila. You know I'm just kidding around. You're such a good sport about everything. That's what I love about you. You never get offended or make a big scene about anything." The cruelty of that moment was breathtaking. Here I stood in the house I'd bought with 15 years of savings after spending a week of my time and my money to make her party perfect, being mocked as the help in front of strangers who didn't even know I was family. Time seemed to slow as I stood there absorbing the full impact of what had just happened. The silver tray in my hands suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds, and I could feel every eye in the room watching my reaction. A flood of memories rushed through my mind in those silent seconds. All those years of working 2 jobs to keep food on our table. The nights I'd fallen asleep at the kitchen table exhausted from balancing checkbooks and stretching every dollar. The pride I'd felt when I finally had enough saved to buy this house, this symbol of everything I'd worked for and accomplished. I thought about every time I'd bitten my tongue, when Brittany treated me like hired help. Every occasion when I'd swallowed my hurt feelings and reminded myself that family meant putting others first. Every moment when Marcus had dismissed my concerns as oversensitivity instead of recognizing the pattern of disrespect I'd been enduring. But standing there in that doorway being laughed at by people who didn't even know my name or my relationship to their hostess, something crystallized inside me. A clarity I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to shout or cry or give Brittany the dramatic reaction she might have expected. Instead, I carefully walked into the living room and gently set the serving tray down on the coffee table, with the same quiet dignity I'd maintained my entire life. With every eye still on me, I slowly removed the apron I'd been wearing, folded it with deliberate care, and placed it neatly beside the tray. "You know what, Brittany?" I said, my voice steady and calm. "You're absolutely right. I do look like the help." I paused, making eye contact with her for the first time since her cruel joke began. "The difference is the help gets paid." The room fell completely silent. No more nervous laughter, no more wine-fueled commentary, just heavy, uncomfortable quiet. I walked to the hall closet where I'd hung my purse and coat when I arrived, retrieved both items with unhurried movements, and returned to the living room entrance. "Thank you all for what has been a very educational evening," I said to the group. "I think I'll head home now." Brittany stammered suddenly, seeming to realize that her joke had gone too far. "Sheila, wait. I was just kidding around. You know I didn't mean anything by it." I turned back to look at her one final time, this young woman who had lived in my house for 2 years, who had benefited from my generosity and kindness, who had just humiliated me in front of strangers for entertainment. "I know exactly what you were doing, dear," I replied quietly. "And more importantly, I know exactly what I'm going to do about it." With that, I walked out the front door of my own house, leaving behind a room full of people who were beginning to understand they'd just witnessed something terrible. The drive home to my little apartment was eerily quiet. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't cry, didn't even feel particularly angry. Instead, my mind was working with a focus and determination I hadn't experienced in years. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, I knew exactly what needed to happen next. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, matching the absolute clarity I felt about what I needed to do. I'd slept better than I had in months, waking up refreshed and purposeful. After my morning coffee and a light breakfast, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Linda Morrison Real Estate, this is Linda speaking." "Linda, it's Sheila Johnson. I hope you don't mind me calling on a Sunday, but I have something important to discuss with you." Linda Morrison had been a family friend for over a decade. She'd helped me find my apartment when I moved out of the house, and she'd been the agent who'd originally helped me buy the Maple Street property years earlier. "Sheila, of course I don't mind. What can I help you with?" "I need to sell my house on Maple Street, quietly and quickly." The pause on the other end of the line was telling. "But Sheila, doesn't Marcus live there with his wife? Are they planning to buy it from you?" No, Linda, they're not planning anything, and that's exactly why I need to sell it. How quickly do you think we could make this happen? Well, the market is really strong right now. That neighborhood is very desirable, and your house has been beautifully maintained. We could probably have it under contract within a week or two if we price it right. But Sheila, are you absolutely sure about this? This seems very sudden. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. But Linda, I need this handled with complete discretion. No yard signs, no public listings, no advertisements. Can you handle it through your network of investors and private buyers? Linda's voice grew serious. She could hear the determination in my tone and knew better than to question my decision further. Absolutely. I have several clients who've been looking for exactly that type of property. Let me make some calls and get back to you by this afternoon. The house that I'd bought for $90,000 15 years earlier was now worth approximately $250,000, thanks to the improvements I'd made and the neighborhood's appreciation. Even after agent commissions and closing costs, I'd walk away with enough money to completely change my life. Linda called back at 3 o'clock with incredible news. She'd contacted a young family who'd been looking for a house in that exact neighborhood for months. The husband was a doctor, the wife was a teacher, and they had 2 elementary-aged children who would love the yard and the quiet street. They want to see it tomorrow afternoon, and Sheila, they're prepared to make a cash offer if they love it. This could happen very, very quickly. Perfect. Set up the showing. Over the next week, I maintained my normal routine with Oscar-worthy acting skills. I went to work, ran errands, and even stopped by the house once to drop off some mail that had been delivered to my apartment by mistake. Brittany was overly sweet that day, clearly feeling guilty about the party incident, but unsure how to address it directly. "I'm so glad you stopped by," she said, practically gushing. "I've been meaning to call you. We should have lunch soon and catch up properly." I smiled and nodded, accepting her superficial overture while knowing it would never happen. "That sounds lovely, dear." The showing went perfectly. The young family fell in love with the house, immediately charmed by the original hardwood floors, the updated kitchen, and the mature trees in the backyard. Their children ran through the rooms with delight, already claiming bedrooms and planning where their toys would go. They made a cash offer of $240,000 that evening. I accepted without hesitation, and we scheduled closing for exactly 30 days from that Tuesday. During those 30 days, I began the delicate process of removing my personal belongings from the house. I told Brittany I was reorganizing and decluttering, which wasn't technically untrue. Room by room, I quietly reclaimed items that held sentimental value. My grandmother's china set family photo albums, my mother's jewelry box books that had been gifts from Marcus over the years. I stored everything in my apartment, creating neat piles of memories and treasures that represented decades of my life. Each item I retrieved felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd gradually given away. The closing was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I signed papers with the same quiet dignity I'd maintained throughout this entire process, officially transferring ownership to the young family who would fill those rooms with laughter and love. Linda handed me the certified check, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. "Sheila," she said as we left the title company office, "I have to ask, when are you going to tell Marcus and Brittany?" I looked at my watch. It was 3:15 on Thursday afternoon. "I'm not," I replied calmly. "They'll find out tomorrow morning when the moving truck arrives." Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel like new beginnings. I was sipping my coffee and reading the newspaper in my quiet apartment when my phone rang at exactly 7:15. Sheila, what is going on? There's a moving truck in our driveway, and people are saying they bought our house." Brittany's voice was high and panicked, the controlled sweetness completely gone. I set down my coffee cup and took a deep breath. Good morning, Brittany. Yes, there's a moving truck there because the new owners are moving in today. New owners. What new owners? Sheila, this has to be some kind of mistake. No mistake, dear. I sold my house. The silence on the other end lasted so long, I wondered if the call had been dropped. Finally, Brittany's voice came back smaller and more confused than I'd ever heard it. But we live here. Where are we supposed to go? I suppose you'll need to figure that out. The new owners are a very nice young family with 2 children. I'm sure they'll be excellent neighbors. I could hear rustling sounds, voices in the background, what sounded like car doors slamming. Sheila, you can't be serious. You can't just sell the house without telling us we have nowhere to go. Actually, I can, and I did. The house was mine, Brittany. I bought it, I owned it, and I had every legal right to sell it. Just like you had every right to treat me like hired help in front of your friends. Another long pause. I could practically hear the gears turning as she processed what I'd said. That was just a joke. I was just kidding around. You know, I didn't mean anything serious by it. I'm sure that's how you justified it to yourself. But you know what, dear? I've discovered that when someone shows you who they really are, it's important to believe them. Marcus called 30 minutes later, his voice tight with stress and confusion. Mom, I just got off the phone with Brittany. Please tell me there's been some misunderstanding. Please tell me you didn't actually sell the house without telling us. No misunderstanding, son. I sold my house to a family who will appreciate it. But Mom, how could you do this? We're your family. We had no warning, no time to prepare. For the first time in this entire situation, I felt a flash of real anger. Family, Marcus. Let me tell you what family means. Family means working 2 jobs for 15 years so your child can have opportunities. Family means buying a house and then giving it up so your son and his wife can have a place to live, rent-free. Family means spending your own money and vacation time preparing for parties where your daughter-in-law can impress her friends. My voice grew stronger as I continued. Family does not mean being treated like a servant in your own house. Family does not mean being mocked and humiliated for entertainment. And family certainly doesn't mean having your concerns dismissed as oversensitivity when you try to address these problems. Marcus was quiet, and I could hear the weight of realization in his silence. Mom, I had no idea it had gotten that bad. Brittany never told me about what happened at the party. Of course she didn't. But Marcus, this isn't just about one party. This is about months of being taken for granted, of being treated like I existed solely to serve her convenience. And it's about you being so focused on keeping your wife happy that you couldn't see how unhappy your mother had become. We talked for another hour with Marcus, asking question after question, slowly understanding the full scope of what had been happening. He apologized repeatedly, admitting he'd been blind to Brittany's treatment of me and defensive whenever I'd tried to bring up concerns. What can we do to fix this, Mom? How can we make this right? You can start by finding your own place to live and building a marriage based on mutual respect rather than entitlement. And you can remember that your mother isn't a convenience to be used when needed and dismissed when not. The next few weeks were chaotic for them. They scrambled to find an affordable apartment, struggled with security deposits and moving expenses, and faced the reality of paying rent on Marcus's single income, while Brittany's part-time boutique job barely covered her car payment. 6 months later, I wasn't surprised to receive a call from Marcus telling me he and Brittany were divorcing. She blamed you for everything, Mom, for selling the house, for turning me against her, for all our financial problems. She couldn't understand that her actions had consequences, and she couldn't take responsibility for the way she'd treated you. I'm sorry your marriage didn't work out, son, but I'm not sorry I stood up for myself. I am sorry, though. I'm sorry I didn't protect you, didn't listen when you tried to tell me what was happening. I let you down as your son. That conversation marked the beginning of rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and honest communication. As for me, I used the money from the house sale to do something I dreamed about for decades, but never thought possible. I booked a 2-month trip to Europe, visiting Paris, Rome, and London, sending Marcus postcards from each city, showing him that his mother was not just surviving, but thriving. Standing on the Pont Neuf in Paris watching the Seine flow beneath my feet, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. 6 months earlier, I'd been a woman who accepted disrespect because I thought family loyalty required it. Now, I was someone who understood that true self-respect sometimes demands difficult choices. When I returned home, Marcus visited frequently, and our relationship was stronger than it had been in years. One evening, as we shared dinner in my apartment, he said something that meant the world to me. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my respect. What you did took incredible courage. You taught me that kindness isn't weakness, but that allowing people to take advantage of your kindness definitely is." I smiled and patted his hand. "Son, sometimes we have to lose something to realize its true value. You lost a wife who didn't respect your family, but you gained a better understanding of what real relationships should look like." "What did you lose, Mom?" "I lost the illusion that being a people pleaser would earn me genuine love and respect. And I discovered that sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest." Looking back now, I realize that night at the party was a gift, though it certainly didn't feel like one at the time. Brittany's cruel joke forced me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding for months. I'd been so busy trying to be the perfect mother-in-law, the perfect helper, the perfect support system that I'd forgotten to be a person worthy of respect and consideration. I learned that there's a difference between being generous and being a doormat. Generosity comes from a place of strength and choice, while being a doormat comes from fear and the mistaken belief that you have to earn love by accepting poor treatment. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect isn't anger or confrontation, but quiet, decisive action. I may have looked like the maid that night, but I was the one who held all the power. I just needed to remember that. When people ask me now if I regret selling the house so suddenly, I tell them the only thing I regret is waiting so long to value myself enough to take action. Respect isn't something you can demand from others. It's something you command through your own behavior and choices. And sometimes, the most important person who needs to learn to respect you is yourself. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family or friends took your kindness for granted? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below and let me know if you think I did the right thing by selling that house. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and finding your strength. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to put yourself first sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you teach people how to treat you by what you accept. Choose to accept nothing less than respect.